So, hi everyone, and I'm Vedha Thilagarajan, and I'm a first-year graduate student in Health Research Methodology program at McMaster University, working under Flourish Lab under Dr. Rohan D'Souza. So, I'm here to talk about a scoping review which we have done to explore the effect of temperature on pregnancy outcomes. And before getting into the topic, let me give you a brief background about that. So we all know that like pregnant individuals and fetus like undergo various physiological changes, and especially like we all know that climate change has been rapidly increasing in the past few years, and these environmental influences during pregnancy can have immediate and long-term consequences to both the pregnant individual and the baby. And supporting this, like the World Health Organization has also published a call to action report in the year 2023, stating that pregnant individuals, newborns, and children are particularly vulnerable to health impacts of climate change. And there have been a lot of studies published and also systematic reviews that have demonstrated associations between temperature variables and pregnancy outcomes. And recently, there has also been an umbrella review that has been published by Nyadona et al. In Jan 2024, summarizing these systematic reviews. But they were not able to come to a conclusion on what exactly is the association between extreme temperature variables and pregnancy outcomes. So the rationale of this study was to review all research studies reporting on the association to identify methodological limitations that has been done. And to the right, you can also see an image published by the UNFPA, just giving some direct impacts and indirect impacts of climate change on maternal health. So the objective of our study was to describe methodological variations in studies on temperature variables and pregnancy outcomes, and critically appraise the approaches used. So following the PICO framework, we included original research studies that had reported an association between just temperature-related variables and pregnancy outcomes, and that were published from August 1983 till August 2024. And for the exposures, as we plan to only focus on extreme temperatures and exclude like other variables that are resultant of climate change, like for example, floods, hurricanes, we included like temperature-related variables such as ambient temperature, surface temperature, and apparent temperature. And also extreme temperature variables like heat waves, heat exposures, which are the words like you have been seeing common nowadays in the recent news, and also heat index. And for the outcomes, we plan to focus on all the maternal outcomes from conception until 1 year postpartum, fetal outcomes from conception until birth, and neonatal outcomes from birth until 28 days of life. So for, our search strategy was designed such that we plan to utilize all the original studies that have been included in umbrella review, because the umbrella review covered most of the studies, and there were 11 systematic reviews included in that umbrella review. And from that, we found around 436 original research articles, out of which 204 were duplicates. And finally, we used around 232 records for assessing for its eligibility. And as I mentioned before, we just want to include extreme temperature-related variables and focus on maternal and fetal outcomes, and we excluded records that had different exposures, different study designs, and different outcomes. So finally, we included around 111 articles for our review. And so then we wanted to extract the following data for our analysis, and for that, like we also we plan to include all the study details and paper details to find different studies published in different locations. And also, as we want to see the methodological limitations, we wanted to explore in detail about the different data source that has been used in different papers for determining both exposures and outcomes, and also the method of exposure calculation, because like when we saw different studies, we saw that like there were different data formulas and also different ways of calculation that has been used. And similarly, that was for the outcome definition, because when again we saw for outcomes, like for example, we consider one of outcome as preterm birth, like there were different definitions for one outcome published in different papers, and again we want to see that. And finally, we also want to see the different analytic methods used, and also the details of analysis, and also the confounding variables that have been used for adjustment. And you can, to the left side, you can see the geographical distribution of the studies that have been present, among which 3 were from Canada and 1 was from the Caribbean islands. And to the right, you can see the sample size of the studies, where you can see like out of 111, above 50 studies had sample size less than 100,000, which might result in sampling bias. And then coming to the exposures, like as we plan to focus on temperature-related variables, we can see most of the studies have focused on using ambient temperatures, which is nothing but like measuring the temperature of the surrounding air. So they use the mean temperatures for either on a daily or weekly basis or even for a monthly basis. And then they also, then 11 papers consider apparent temperature, which is nothing but kind of a feel-like temperature, how you see in your mobile phones. That just that's a combination of ambient temperature, humidity, and also wind speed. And then like we also considered surface temperature, but only 3 papers have focused on surface temperature. And surface temperature is like more of an accurate temperature, which we are planning to use in our upcoming study. So surface temperature just measures exact land temperature, and it might differ from between different places. Like for example, the urban has more surface temperature, urban areas, and the surrounding natural sites have lesser urban temperatures. And then the most common used words, heat waves and heat index, that tells us about the different types of hot days. And what we observed is that, like heat waves, for example, like there were different definitions given in different papers, and also different definitions concerning the same paper. Like similar to one given on the right side, you can see that one definition states that clusters of hot days within 2 accurate exposure windows, 7 days and 4 days preceding the birth date. And likewise, if you can see the definition below, like there are at least 3 consecutive days. And finally, just 2 papers focused on heat index. And heat index is it is the same as apparent temperature, but it just gives a definition, like kind of a definition of the person should stay in that area or not, or the person might get some medical condition based on the threshold levels. And coming up to the outcomes, for the outcomes you can see that like most of the papers had focused on preterm birth, and second was low birth weight, and then stillbirth. And in this you can see that like most of the papers have only focused on neonatal outcomes, and when it comes to maternal outcomes, like length of pregnancy and risk of cardiovascular event. And there have been many outcomes that have been omitted, like such as postpartum hemorrhage, miscarriage, and also maternal morbidity and mortality, and also neonatal mortality. So we also plan to focus on these outcomes in our upcoming study. And coming on to the methods utilized in different papers, you can see that like these are the methods that have been used in different papers, and that is why it would have been very difficult even for the umbrella review to come to a conclusion of what method to exactly use in the analysis to determine the association between temperature and pregnancy outcomes. Coming up to the confounding variables, this is an exhaustive list of variables that have been used for adjustment. And again, for each study, the variables differ, and not all these variables have been included in all the studies. And you can see the methodological variations in one of the systematic review that have been included in umbrella review, and this is the reason we were telling about the variation in the studies that is published by FC Matthew et al. Like you can see the variations in the forest plots between each different original studies. And finally, to wrap up, like there has been considered methodological variation between different studies, rendering it challenging to determine the exact estimates. So we intend to use the information gathered from all the studies included in the scoping review to develop a rigorous study protocol, and possibly employ machine learning techniques using large North American data sets to provide more accurate estimates of the effect of temperature on pregnancy outcomes. And I would like to take this moment to thank all my supervisors and my team, and some of them are present here. Thank you all for this opportunity.